Welcome back to this video series on building an expedition camper and following up from my last video on spin welding tank fittings. And in this video, I'm going to share with you the rest of the installation of the gray water system in between the chassis frame rails so I can prepare the chassis for installation of the actual expedition camper body and box, which I am super excited to get to. But first, we got to get this chassis ready and this water system installed. So let's dive into it. All right, shout out to McMaster Car for having a 1-inch barbed 90-degree fitting and just wrapped with Teflon tape, putting this into my final and third gray water tank. I have 3 gray water tanks. It's just because of the spaces that I have between the chassis frame rails and the subframe rails, be able to get them down in there where I've built space, and also where I've been taking up space for compressed air tanks and the air compressor that are also between the chassis rails here. One of those tanks was ordered to the dimensions I wanted. The other 2 were off the shelf dimensions I'm just piecing together. So they're all plumbed together as one tank. They're all at the same level. They all drain together. So the fill between them is all the same. So they basically equalize fill between all. There's one tank sensor since they're all at the same height as well. And so there's a little bit of thought through just to do all that. And then there's one drain at the bottom of, it's going to be this tank. So I'm going to do one more spin on weld fitting, bottom of this tank. After I get these fittings in, just test fit it, make sure everything fits up like I hope before I put this last hole in. That's going to be a threaded hole for my 1-inch stainless electronic tank drain. And if you had watched my video on my van build, I installed a electronic tank drain valve for my gray water tank. It's fantastic. I could reach right back from the driver's seat, click it, drain that valve, do it wherever is appropriate place to do it. And that was a massive benefit to just be able to manage a gray water drain, which is pretty much just water with a little bit of soap. In this camper build, it's going to be a little more shower time because I have a lot more water and a full stand-up shower always set up ready to go. So I wanted a little more gray water capacity than I could really fit in different places, and I am putting all that in the chassis rails. My philosophy on this is it really doesn't matter if your gray water tanks freeze as long as they're not full. If they're only partially full, half full, let's just say, to as much as even about 3/4 full, they're just simply the water is going to freeze. It's just going to expand. If all of your fittings are durable fittings and that tank has room, the water has room to expand within those tanks, it's not going to cause a problem, and your hoses and so forth are capable of withstanding any kind of bursting pressures from the freezing water may be in there. Part of why I also like to drain out my water regularly, not have much water in there, is I don't have that risk. And also I use things like stainless drain valves because that is, of course, a place where water is always essentially collected. The front tank is right over the catalytic converters, so it's overheat. Yeah, I did put a stainless heat shield there. The other 2 are over the very back tail end of the muffler, just behind it, so they're going to get a little bit of heat from that as the engine is running, but only when the engine is running, and so it's really not going to be all that beneficial most of the time. What I am going to do to accommodate that time when I'm going to be up in the Arctic Circle watching the Northern Lights, which is, you know, the intent of having a vehicle like this, be able to go do things like that. A very well insulated camper, good windows, a good electric heating system and electric hot water and so forth, that I can really operate in any climate, condition or zone. And so in those conditions, yeah, I wouldn't really be able to use my external gray water for very long or very much. Obviously hot water flowing down there would thaw it out somewhat, but if it wasn't much water in there, it would be fine. But what I'm going to do is also put a small gray water tank on the inside of the vehicle, inside of a cabinet down low, and that's going to at least be able to collect bathroom and kitchen sink water. And so I can still use those, have that water inside where it's not going to be able to freeze. And then I'm contemplating doing a sump pump to basically pump from the shower pan into that little tank, just so I can at least take a short shower, or someone else can take a short shower and still be in freezing weather until there's a time when the drain valve can be opened up or the external tanks can be used. So that's the thought there. So anyways, I'm just getting this all wrapped up. I'm excited because I already have my mounts in there mostly done. I just got to finish the strapping to support these tanks, get these in there, finish fewer things on the hose system. So I am thrilled to finally get these last remaining parts that I needed to finish this up. So here we go. So what I did, you can see I installed actually an aluminum street elbow or threaded to female threaded, and then I'm putting on this screen vent. The reason why I did that, I didn't need to do that. I'm doing that purely because it raises the vent up ever so slightly. It also then any water that sloshes forward when I'm braking will basically hit this wall. It'll come up that 90 and I'll have a harder time actually draining out instead of bubbling or squirting out. So it just gives you a little more height and pushes the air a little bit different direction. You can see here this is going to be the camper heights. It's going to be about as high as it can go from underneath the camper for the way I have it. And I definitely didn't need to use an aluminum angle there. I could have certainly used a plastic one. Any plastic, ABS, PVC, whatever would have been fine. But I chose to use aluminum, not because I actually wanted to, because that was what was available. And right now supply chain issues are causing me to have to make some modifications on what I would normally pick. The aluminum's lightweight, it won't rust. I wouldn't use it if this were fresh water because it can have a reaction with fresh water. It's not terrible, but it's fine for gray water because obviously it's going out. It's not causing any problems to the environment or to my water supply at all. So this is great, and this is a really nice setup. I'm going to do the same thing on the other two gray water tanks. So that's my little trick there. Let me show you so you can see a little better here. There you go. Okay, so right now I am switching the direction the water tank lays. My gray water outlet is on the driver's side. I'm going to switch it so that it's on the passenger side. And now that I've run my other two tanks, which that was a little bit up in the air because I had to do an adjustment. I was going to install an extra fuel tank and interconnect the two together. And due to supply chain issues, I could not get those extra fuel tanks, even though they were supposed to arrive and all this stuff, and it didn't happen. It held me up actually several days waiting for it because I couldn't do anything else until those came. Kind of like a foundation, they were at the base of the foundation. So I am now just simply swapping my gray water tank because my interconnect for my shower and my other gray water tanks on this side, and my same is for the other two gray water tanks on this side as well. So I'm just going to keep it all on this side, which is great. I don't have to cross over. And also the other benefit of that is it all stays above the exhaust system, so it'll be more likely to stay thawed out in below freezing weather. And while I have this out, let me just show you real quick the way I installed this. Whoops. Okay, so I've got this thin stainless steel sheet here. This is really heat shield between the catalytic converter and other exhaust and a little bit of that prop shaft there in this gray water tank, just to make sure that it's secure and safe. I had to move a couple of this wiring around the way that it was wired, just simply reposition where it was clipped in. This wire here, I bent down these brackets. These big heavy steel brackets are riveted in to simply hold this little tiny sensor wire. So I just simply bent these brackets down to get this out of the way because they were out to here, so that we could open up this space for this 8-gallon water tank right here. And this is where my connection is going to be for my gray water. So I'm going to actually just hook those up right now. This is out, and then just pop this back down, put my strap back over it. Alright, it is a real toughie getting this hose through here, but I measured it out. I know I could get the hose through here, just it's tight, and partly because the hose has a bend or a kink to it, the way it's spooled up when it's shipped. And so I'm dealing with that bend. There we go, got it through that spot. Fits just perfectly, beautifully through there. Now I can probably pull it up a little more and get it connected to the tank here. And there's also some other sensors and stuff down here, sensor wires and things like that. So let me get this bad boy connected with a stainless steel hose clamp. But sometimes these little things take a little bit of effort. Okay, so I got the hose over the T here on the tank, at least on one side. And then when I think about, what I do try to think about is also the hose clamp, where it can be accessed from later on. And unfortunately, the position that's in here can only really be accessed with the camper off. So I'm going to rotate it around now that I have it on there and fairly tight, and so that it can be accessed from down below when the camper is all built. So just something to think about. Think about your ability to replace, repair, tighten something up, especially like a hose clamp, which do or can loosen. I try to use stainless vibration resistant hose clamps. They are more expensive, but I don't have to worry about them loosening up and leaking, and of course stainless rusting out or becoming a bear to take off and replace sometime in the future. One of the challenges with that is just the availability. Right now there's not a lot of things available, so sometimes you just got to go with what you have. And unfortunately I have a lot of stuff left over from past projects, so just trying to make sure to think about that repairability and removability for the you or the next user. All right, so what I'm doing is I'm tightening up these hose clamps just so they're taut. But they're in a way where I can still access them from below here. And I've got to pull this hose through because it's definitely a challenge getting all this in here, including my hand in there, while all this hose is now connected, and the wires that are here in the center and their brackets, and you can see, voila, she's in. So I've got my shower connection, I've got my interconnect to my gray water tanks, my stainless heat shield between the exhaust, which is rad. So I'm just going to rotate that from here. So I know if I can install it and tighten it from down here, I can definitely remove it from down here, which is so great. But the nice thing is, my heat shield down here that I have, my stainless heat shield, and I do have this wire here that I went ahead and put a protective sheath around it. But this will just give a little more protection from the tank over the exhaust here and these hoses, so they look great. So let's go back top side. I've got my top side tank strap, just simply to hold it down. Then I'm retightening back down, putting it over it. And it's just to make sure that the tank can't bounce up. Not that it's going to go anywhere. There's a camper above it. It's going to be a camper above it. But just in case I hit that big speed bump down in Baja, Mexico. Those speed bumps are huge. Get this tightened down, and I locking that on there. Okay, cool. So seeing the strap, you can kind of see here, is such rad stuff, because not only can you kind of bend it in place, it's got these holes to put quarter 20 or smaller bolts in here. You can get in bigger sizes. It is incredibly strong yet light and does the job fantastically well. I kind of like this layout a little better with the gray water tank in this position anyways, because now my vent is at the back of the tank, so really we don't accelerate quickly, we brake way quicker at a way faster rate of speed change. So now with the vent in the back, the gray water, whatever gray water is going to slosh here, and then of course it's going to bounce back, but really the main force is going to be in the front. So this will help keep my gray water from sloshing out, and this little bit of an angle here on that just helps to keep that from sloshing out. So I am stoked about that. I've got to wire up that tank sensor and finish plumbing out and strapping up with some zip ties this gray water line as it goes to the back here to this other tank. So got to finish that up and install the very back tank too. Idea just how strong this stainless strap is. I've already gone about 10 times across the same area here with these very strong bolt cutters, even at an angle so they're not cutting all the way across. The whole strap, putting all my weight into it, and after about 10 of these, I am still not through this. Those fellas break it off, and I cut it intentionally at an angle, so not only had to cut so deep, but also on each cut, but also to make it less sharp on the edges there, so I don't cut myself. So let's get this installed. All right, so a couple of tips with this stainless steel strap. One, when you're cutting it, cut it with a big hole through the big holes, so you have less to cut, less distance to cut, right? Because the big holes in the middle just cut right through that. And the other one is I actually pressed down on my piece of metal here with the handle so I could get more force on it, like this, when cutting it. Then we'll have to show you all the struggles I was dealing with there to cut that. And the other one is, of course, you got these sharp edges, or can have sharp edges on it, so you got to be careful of those. The nice thing is you can easily bend it and wrap around these tanks, so you can actually get a nice square edge around these tanks, which is really rad. And I'm actually right now just kind of like setting it to more or less exactly the height I want it, and actually giving a little bit of an angle as well. And the other thing, nice thing about this strap is that you don't have to drill any holes, of course. That's because the holes are drilled. And all you gotta do is basically just go down another hole, and you get about another inch or so of play. So you can really set your distance there really nicely. And so again, I'm really thinking about removability here. It's not gonna be easy to remove this, but it will be doable to remove this. And so by somebody else later on, that's what they need to do. Hopefully that doesn't have to happen. And another little tip when working with the stainless strap, what I like to do, so I have a little tail there on this, of this sharp edge. Let me show you. So you can see this little bit of a tail right here on the sharp with the sharp edge sticking out. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to bend it up over and tuck it in here into the Z rail, so that way it's up and out of the way. So someone can't, if they reach up in there, not going to get their hand cut, or it's not going to rub against some wire to get cut or something like that as well. And you can see my gray water tank connector here, hose, and that connects all the tanks together. And there. Now that's very nicely tucked away. It's out of the way. Someone else getting in there. And I'll show you something else I did too. When installing this Z-rail here that is incredibly strong, just aluminum, I think it's 1/8 inch, holding up these tanks here the straps are connected to. I also scalloped out just using a big hole saw, scalloped this out. This bolt for the shock can easily be accessed and the shock can be slid off without this scallop, but boy, it's going to make it so much easier when it comes time to ever removing or replacing those shocks. So just wanted a little tip to think about again for the future.